On today's episode of the Sales Factor podcast, we have James Bissell. He is a high performing sales rep that's turned VP of sales. He also runs his own training and coaching business, and he's super passionate about helping salespeople become elite at selling. Now, why is that? Well, over 70% of salespeople get little or no sales training at all. And actually, he was one of those reps in his previous career. So, what better way to give back to the market? So, super excited to have him on the show. Let's get into it. James, what is the biggest challenge or the biggest problem that you're finding in sales right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of people ask that all the time in our leadership team, but also CEOs and founders that I talk to from time to time. And I don't think there's just one problem, but I think they all typically stem back to what I think is possibly the biggest problem, which is the lack of training and development and coaching that happens inside of organizations in general, but especially in the sales organization. So just to kind of in a context, I spend my mornings and evenings coaching and helping BDRs, AEs, some VPs, and I've got a couple of CEOs and founders that I'm working with. And typically, I always ask them, like, how often do you train people? How often do you coach them? What are their coaching plans look like? What skills have you isolated to train them on, and kind of glaze over? And I think that's just like, they always say you end up becoming, the people that you spend time with, and you end up spending all your time with your colleagues at work. And a lot of managers don't train their people. So then when you become a manager, you typically feel like that's best practice, right? Well, not deliberately, but it's something in the top of your list was like, okay, I'm going to train my people when I become a manager. I need to update my job title on LinkedIn and my email signature and let everyone know that I'm now the VP of sales.
Priorities, right? Priorities.
That's probably a different podcast, but I think the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity for not all, because there are lots of organizations that have enablement teams and they take training really seriously, and probably they've seen the positives after underperformance and a bit of realization. But I think the biggest opportunity for me is training and getting intimate with people and understanding that it's not cookie cutter. Yeah, you might be really good at prospecting, but Sarah is really bad at discovery. But me running, prospecting training with Sarah, who's nailing pipeline activities but can't qualify accounts, is a bit of her waste of her time. So like isolating those challenges and really getting intimate with your people and understanding their strengths and weaknesses. I think the biggest opportunity or the biggest problem especially in the market today, given the state of the economy where people aren't throwing money around for fun, is definitely training.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in that situation myself where in my first sales role when I was in recruitment, like we were thrown into a 2 week like sales, like it was in a room, there was like 20 of us, there was role plays from introduction to rapport building, objection handling, like it was quite intense. But what it did is prepare me for eventualities that would come later on in my sales career. But why do you think it's such a big problem? Do you think it's a lack of training, or is it more that people don't know what to train on, or is there no structure? Like, what do you find in that companies are not potentially
doing? I think it's a couple of things. I think, yes, it's a lack of, but I also think when they do the training, whenever I see like onboarding plans or anything like that, it always starts with the product.
Right.
If you're selling a product, or if a service starts with a service or whatever it might be, it always starts with you and what you deliver, which is important. But I do believe that people don't buy a product, they buy the outcome the product delivers. So, which is the higher you climb in the org, they don't really care about the technical functionality. They care about the metrics and the business outcomes that, they're accountable for delivering upon. So I think when people do deliver training, either very rarely or at the beginning of the onboarding journey, it's always about products, which if you're a BDR for the very first time, that's not going to help you a whole load. You probably need to learn things like tonality and pace and professionalism and how do you structure your diary and, stop running around like a headless chicken and, get some structuring your day. But I think it's such a big problem because, especially more so now, um, and why you probably see, I know there's a lot of layoffs, and there still is, and a big part of that is because of the economy and people have overhired. But I think a lot of it's for underperformance, and it wasn't like it wasn't obvious before, but it's more obvious now when it's harder to sell. Like, it's tough out there, right? Companies
Mm.
are really struggling. Even the ones that are doing well, still, it's still harder than it was before because people are throwing money around like they used to. So when those things change, I remember when the pandemic landed, and I just took on a new assignment. It was tough for sure because nobody had ever sold through it before. We didn't know what to expect, and if you haven't been trained up, you haven't got the skills, if you haven't got the ability to look at the data and understand what do I need to do to move the needle, you're just executing the same way, and those ways typically don't work in these situations. So then, you kind of feel a little bit naked, right? Or those people start to look
Mm.
naked, where before they didn't. So I think the big problem is that it doesn't happen, and when it does, it's focused around the product, and it's people are realizing it way more now because performance is dropping and continuously to drop.
Yeah, I like what you said there because if you do focus on the product, you're focused on like features and the advantages and the benefits of it, and it becomes like too salesy, if you will. It's like, I'm just
Yeah,
forcing this product down your throat, like. But yeah, I think if you strip back actually the reasons why people buy, or is it really tackling the pain point for that business? Do they really need it? Are they the right fit for the business? So yeah, there's loads to unpack there. So and I think what you've said there is from like an onboarding perspective, but I would like to also explore other sides of people that have maybe been doing the job for a few years time and like training for those. Because again, we can kind of get into the hamster wheel that, oh well, they've been doing the job a couple of years, they know what they're doing. But as you said, like anything can happen, COVID, whatever, and we have to adapt and change. Like you look at the way of even sales now from like 5 years ago, it's completely different. There's different set of skill sets. Yes, you've got the underlying tonality, the outreach, and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. Do you see then a lot more people that like from an onboarding perspective, they're just like, here, this is the job, come in, pick up the phone, and go. Is that like what you're seeing, or is there even any training that people throw into the mix?
yeah, totally. And being super honest, and I think anyone that's been in a leadership position, maybe the odd one or two that were lucky to have, a long history of managers that address what we're talking about here. But I was one of those
Mm.
people years and years and years ago when I started to onboard people. I was like, hey, dude, like I hired you because you sound really great on the phone. So like, why don't I can day 5 or 6 when I just start making phone calls because I've shown you the product for 30 minutes,
Yeah.
and I've just thrown up some features and function at you, and and here's my script that works for me. Yeah. So why don't you use it? And then get very frustrated when people don't get the same
Yeah.
results as me, and I'm scratching my head thinking, but he's using my script though. And then you think about it, and you're like, okay, I've been doing this for 12, 13 years, and this poor dude's been doing it for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's part of the challenge is, I was there as well. You kind of just chuck them in at the deep end because, like I said earlier, that's how I've ever, there's a few organizations that do a stellar job with onboarding and training, but there's also been so many that I've worked with where it's like 2 months in, I'm like, I still don't really understand like the real problems that we're solving for here. Like, sounds like we've got a great product, but like, what are
Mm.
we really solving for? Like, what's the deep problem? I get you click that button and it takes me to this page, but like, what's the actual problem that we're really solving? Do we know?
Yeah.
So I think to answer your question, like I think the onboarding plan is critical when you're looking at like capacity and building your team. Obviously, recruitment is top priority. If you can hire A players or as close to A players as you can, the beauty of them is they'll figure some of the stuff out for you, especially in
Mm.
the early stage of a startup, or even when things are changing. They've
Yeah.
they've been around the block, so they'll figure it out. If you hire B's and C players, then your onboarding has to be world class,
Mm.
to bring them up with consistent training and coaching, as well. So yeah, recruitment is obviously killer. It's so critical. You got to have a good business partner there to help you find good talent. But then once you do, onboarding is you should be obsessed with good onboarding, and it should be deep, and it shouldn't
Yeah.
take 3 days to get through, and off you go.
I mean, we've all been there, right? Here's an hour training, away you go.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. So let's unpack there. I want to go a bit deeper onto like what training is super important. So, if we're looking at the overall economy, right? Companies are struggling, and I get it, and everyone's in the same boat. But if the CFO or whoever in the business is looking at the bottom line, we're going to be looking at increasing that sales performance. So if we just look at it from an onboarding, say someone coming into the business, maybe an SDR, BDR, like what have you found training wise is most important for them to get the grips with? And I appreciate there's a million different training aspects to go into, but like the core fundamentals of what people should really be focusing on.
yeah. I think you shouldn't make any assumptions. I think you should look at the data, and if you haven't got the data, you should get hold of the data. Like when you're looking at cold calling, for example, if somebody's not booking meetings, it might not be because their pitch is really weak. It might just be because they're not making enough phone calls. If they're phoning 6 people in the day, and we know that it typically takes 35 dials to book a meeting, well, there's my coaching opportunity, right? There's my training opportunity. Is it then not, they're not comfortable with the CRM? Is the CRM not set up for success for them? Have they not got well-defined lists that they can dial through in a power hour? Like, what's the actual reason? But a lot of people just, I call them scoreboard managers. They sit behind their Salesforce dashboard and they just call activity metrics. And when less meetings get booked, they call for more. Right, and you're scratching your head thinking, I can't get to the call volume as it is. How am I going to hit the 30% bump that I've just been
Mm,
given? So I think like you have to use the data to start with, because like I said, sales isn't cookie cutter, and I've worked
mm,
in lots of different industries, selling to lots of different buyers, and IT in the UK buy very differently to HR in the US. They're completely different sales motions, different buyers, and then the moment that you're in, it was different 5 years ago selling to IT. So like you have to use the data to design the training and the coaching. If you've got a
mm.
pipeline problem, look at the data. Is it sending emails? Is it calling? Is it CRM activity? Like what's the problem? And then focus your training, dial down into those areas. Don't get me wrong. Like if you've got an email reply rate problem, then it's probably email copy or spam or whatever it might be. I'm not saying
Sure.
neglect the phone, but
Mm.
let's take a look at the email situation, and let's do some training. Let's build some workshops, and then I think the other thing, which is a super powerful opportunity, is reinforcement.
Yeah.
So like 2 4 weeks later, let's do a check-in workshop and let's pull the data and see let's move the needle, and let's get some feedback and create like a safe space
Mm.
for people to give that feedback, um, and then make some iterations and go again. And that's why
Yeah.
training isn't a once a year thing, right?
I mean, some companies do, and I get it, but that's why we're highlighting this sort of challenge and problem right now. And yeah, I giggled at what you said there because I've been in a situation where it's like just do more phone calls, just do more emails, and it's like doesn't really solve the problem, right? We need to open up the bonnet, really uncover like, okay, if say it's cold calling, okay, well, doing more calls, doing the exact same thing, like Einstein's, insanity quote, is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results, right? So if more phone calls, more emails is not really going to change the outcome. It's more about, okay, well, what's actually being said in that phone call? Like how are you approaching it? Like with training then, what have you found like most effective? So if we just take cold calling, for example, like is it more the science and the understanding of it, or is it more like role plays and getting them to do it? Or like how have you found that people learn and get the most out of it?
Yeah, I depending on the audience, I'll use football because everyone's a football fan. I'm more of an F1 and a golfing fan.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say a golfing fan. I tried to play golf, but I hit 18 balls into the trees off the tee.
I mean,
Um,
there's definitely a sport out there for that somewhere, but
there is. I don't think I'll be playing in the PGA anytime soon. But I always use like the sports analogy. So I went to PGA tournament last year, and I was watching Rory and a few of the pros warm up, and they weren't sat there drinking coffee with each other, talking about coffees for closers and like, oh, I'm gonna crunch it 350 yards down the fairway, etc., etc. They were on the driving range 2 hours before they teed off, and they weren't just getting the driver out then and just ripping. If you imagine the close,
Yeah.
yeah, they were just ripping the driver, hitting bombs down the middle of the fairway. They were pulling out, the wedges, and they were just hitting 50 balls. Then they're pulling out, a 9 iron, hitting 50 balls, getting a feel for it. Maybe doing some drills. Then they were hitting the 7 iron, then the 5 iron, then the woods, and then they got the driver out, and they were hit, 30, 50 balls with the driver. And they basically went through the process, right?
Mm.
Then they went onto the putting green. They started doing their putting drills. So that when they got onto the tee box, they were ready. They knew that unless like
Yeah.
the tornado came through and took the ball out of the flight path it was going to go down, it was going to go down the middle. And everyone we watched did. Um, and that's why I don't hit the ball down the middle, because I don't have the time to practice or the desire to practice
Mm.
golf, because I'm not as passionate about it as I am sales. So that what I'm getting at here is role play is critical. If you don't practice and practice in the right way, there's practicing and there's practicing.
Mm.
You can't just jump on a script once a week, run through it twice from top to bottom, and then go out and make cold calls. You can do, and you might get some success. But I think if you're going to do role play for cold calling, which we're talking about here, let me start with my opener. So let me just run through that 5 times. Hey, Aaron, James has seen it. We've never spoken before, but can I take 35 seconds to explain why I'm trying to call you today? Cool, let me do that 5 times. Okay, Aaron, can I get some feedback? What's my tonality like? What's my pace like? Do I sound professional? Do I sound interesting? Do I sound boring? What can I do differently? And then move on to like my opener, building value, then moving into my close, objection handling, a little bit of stretching, and I feel ready to go, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I jump on the phones and do a power out. I feel fired up. I feel confident. I feel ready. I think that's where a lot of people get this stuff wrong is top performing athletes
Mm.
practice every single day.
Yeah.
Ronaldo doesn't run onto the pitch at time and start scoring bicycle kicks from the halfway line. He's there dribbling with the ball, passing to feet, controlling the ball, right? He's doing the
Mm.
basics. And for us in sales, the basics is practicing the role play, practicing discovery, running demos, writing business case, copywriting.
Yeah, yeah. And when you were saying that, like, there's just so many examples of like superstar athletes that have been doing it, even in basketball world. They're doing the free throws for hours and hours and hours on end, and yeah, it's such a crucial point. Like, and I get like within the workforce, if you're hybrid, home or in the office, it can be different challenges there. But obviously, most people are 8:30, 9 o'clock to say 5. So I believe then it's carving time out of that day then to practice that. But like when you were saying it, I've saw some like YouTube videos of other companies before where they do like spot like sales, so they'll throw up an objection, like just in the office floor and stuff like that. I think that's quite cool. It can be again, it depends on the personality of the person if they like that and stuff like that. But if that's ingrained into the culture, like again, it just keeps people on their toes so that they're practicing that, because not you're not going to be speaking to people all day every day. A large amount of your time is going to be dialing and not getting through to people. So when you eventually get through to that person, if you practice with internal teams, role play, safe environment, all that stuff, then I agree. Being more equipped for that phone call, which is good. But do you think then it's more from a management position to then have a decision on training, or should it be more from like people coming into the business if there is no training? Because I imagine like SDRs or AEs are probably sitting there going, "Well, I haven't had training in a while. Like, should they be asking for it? Like, what's the dynamics from both ends?"
Context, I think, is key to answer this question. So if you're someone I'm coaching at the moment that's been in sales for 4 weeks, they've got into a very technical sales process and was told to make cold calls on the third day, you should be interviewing based on raw characteristics that are successful for the role. If you're a startup, you at a very early stage, you might not have seen the raw characteristics required for your context, but maybe another business, so you kind of build your hypotheses there and test it. But um, it's partly on the rep for sure, but as a leader, you should be qualifying those things. Like we found a couple of really good candidates recently, but when we started to really drill into their hunger to acquire new skills, it wasn't there. And
Mm,
given our stage of business, like, yes, we do a lot of training actually every single day, but I also need reps to want to go and do training themselves.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge, is finding that combination of, I think it should come from the leadership team. I think it should be an org-wide initiative, and it should be always on. And then it should cascade down through those individual organizations. Um, but I think the rep should be hungry and motivated to want and go and do that. Want
Mm,
to go and grab a book, buy a course, ask for a day off to go to a webinar or a conference or something, an event to learn industry, or, if you're
mm,
selling into HR, maybe go to a HR conference, or if it's a sales conference, you want to go and learn, what are people talking about right now to develop new skills or learn new skills, then I think the rep should drive that as well. But I don't think it's on one person, but
yeah.
it does get easier if you hire reps that want to acquire skills, and then you want to, which I guess you know this as well, Aaron, and you can probably give some context here as well. But you shouldn't become a manager because you want the job title. If anything,
Yeah.
most of the time you're going to probably earn less money if you actually factor in the hours you work, because it's a 7 day a week gig, right? And you work pretty unsociable hours as a leader. If you're really invested in your people, if you're doing it for the job title, you'll very quickly realize that this sucks. Because
Mm,
if you haven't got any kids, which I don't, you're immediately, not that they're children, but immediately you're responsible for 5 or 6
yeah.
people and developing them, right? And they're not going away.
No.
Um, so I think it's on the rep for sure to be hungry to acquire new skills and reinforce and implement them, but also for the manager to be accountable for making sure their team do get training.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There has to be a combination of both. And, when I've always interviewed people, that raw hunger, because again, we're in sales, right? Yes, we've got salaries and base salaries, but we're doing it for commission, right? That's where we're going to make our, our, our money and increase our potential earnings. And that sort of self-development, self-learning, as well as then coupled with, learning and training from business, super, super important. And even when you were saying about, the old age adage of people saying that good billers don't become good managers. And I'll probably put that down to there's probably no training involved from a senior biller, AE, BDM, whatever, going into then manager and running a team, because it's a different set of skill sets, right? So let's break that down then. So say you had a rep right now in business that is screaming for training. They're doing some self development, but they kind of need more from the business. Like, how should they approach it? How should they go out and actually then get something in the diary or something booked in to then get training for whatever they need?
Yeah, I mean, you can take a horse to water, right? But you can't,
Mm.
and you can kind of shove its head in the water, but I don't recommend doing it, right? But it doesn't mean it's going to drink it. So if you've got a rep that is hungry to learn new skills, point them in especially if they're very, junior, new into sales rep. Say like, and I actually, part of my onboarding is a list of people on LinkedIn that I recommend that they should follow. There's like
Mm.
20 people that are super, and they're not the ones that chat GPT their posts, or the ones that have been in sales for like 5 months and then they say this hack, which I learned this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But like people that have been around the block, right? You can tell they've been around the block. Their advice is pretty sound. You have to take, even mine, you have to take it with a pinch of salt, because context is everything. What works for
Yeah.
me might not work for you. But I give them a list and I'm like, hey, go follow these people, go follow these companies on LinkedIn, subscribe to these newsletters, follow these podcasts, watch these YouTube channels, read these books, point them in direction, like guide them, right? And then you'll find that they'll come to you after a while and be like, hey, I read this book, I closed it on chapter 5. Because again, a lot of people read a book and then put it on the shelf and read the next one, don't implement.
Yeah.
It's like when you find
Mm.
something really cool, chapter 5, just put a pin in it, you know, bend the cover over, go away and experiment with it and come back and then continue once you've started to see some momentum there. Otherwise, you're just reading books for the sake of reading them. You're not actually implementing anything that you're reading.
Such a good
Um,
point. Such a really good point. And I've been guilty of that myself, of just, audio book listening, going for a walk, and then straight on to the next book. Where actually, like, did I really learn anything? Like, because I think learning comes from implementing, right? You know, because I
Yeah.
can learn some stuff, but if I'm not using that information or not using that, what's the point? A bit of a waste of time. So like having I guess a structure internally of like, okay, I'm gonna learn this one thing and then I'm gonna try it. Like I did it about a month ago, similar to what you just said. Like there was someone doing like emails on LinkedIn, and I I went to their website and they had like a bit of an introduction, first email, second email, etc. So I kind of looked at the structure, looked at okay, well, why is that good? Could that work for me? And changed it into my own words, etc. I ended up getting like a 6% higher reply rate, and I was just like, that's nuts. Like, because I was overcomplicating in my mind, as we do. Again, if you're sitting there by yourself, like I think speaking to other people, talking to other people, said, I've got this email. Like, what's your thoughts? Like, have it from a different perspective because you might think, oh, we've got this a wicked idea. This is amazing. People are gonna love it. But you know, getting second and third opinions on how things should be, like, and using other people's stuff, great. But yeah, a really good point there in terms of like actually set the book down, look at what you just learned. Can you implement it? Can you test it and see what the results are
That's,
like?
you probably had
So,
some good managers that have helped you, Aaron, right? Because a big part of coaching is helping the other person to get to that realization of, okay, this is my problem, these are my options, this is how I'm going to take some actions, and then can you just kind of soundboard with you?
yeah.
And it gets to a stage where this is like the beauty where I am now, like 9 months in. My team are like, we'll have a challenge with a deal, maybe late stage. They'll phone me or we're in the office and I'm like, can we just grab an E real quick? And I'm like, sure. And they're like, this is the situation. I'm like, cool. What do you think we should do? What would you do if I
Mm,
wasn't around? And they literally play back what I would do. And it's like, dude, you don't even need me anymore,
yeah.
right? Like, and that's the beauty of doing this stuff. But 9 months ago, it would have been not hand holding because these guys were still had it in them, but it would have been like walking, leading the witness, right, or walking them to the front
Mm,
door. Where now they can stroll down the path, right, and they'll just walk straight through it. So I think once you help people problem solve,
mm,
it might be with their cold call, the mentality becomes embedded, which is, okay, what is my problem here? What am I actually trying to achieve? Okay, what
mm.
can I do about it? What are my options? And then what actions do I need to go and take? And how am I going to hold myself accountable? And then know when it's starting to work. And a lot of that is
Yeah.
by data.
Yeah, it's a good position to be in because I imagine the people that work for you now like enjoy it and love it. I speak to a lot of from a recruitment perspective, a lot of SDRs that are absolutely hating their job. They want to get out because they're either not performing to level, but performance it can be broken down so many. There could be so many different reasons, right? Training, you know. I don't want to say market. I think we just have to work harder to get better, more sales, right? That's the reality of it. But like they're good people, good personalities, but there's just no like I'd imagine if someone's smashing it, got the support, got the training, they're loving the job. They're not even thinking about potentially leaving the business because if they're performing, doing well, learning, being challenged, which is super important, um, yeah, they're going to stay there for a long time, and that's testament to obviously the training that goes into it, which is obviously the core reason we're having this conversation. So that's from a rep's point of view. Great,
Yeah.
got it. So let's look at the other side then, more from a management sales leader who's potentially looking at this now, going, okay, well, we've got some training, but we don't like how do we go about this? How do we potentially implement it? Do we just chuck it on and say, right, we're doing a month training down tools? Not that that would ever happen, but how should they go about
Yeah.
it?
And just to add to that last bit we just spoke about as well, like I saw a post
Mm,
on LinkedIn the other day, which was like one of these billboards that have been edited. Yeah, you can put whatever you want on there, and it was so close to being so true. It said, when you come to work in sales, you either want to earn or learn, ideally both. And I actually think it should be earn and learn because they're
mm,
connected. If you're learning, if you look at high
sure.
performing, super fast growing organizations, yes, they hire great reps, but they've invested significantly in them. And I don't mean they've bought them a database tool. They've like really, really enabled them. They've trained them. They've given them what I call actual sales tools, which are,
Yeah.
yeah, lifelong tools that they can take with them. They just take a lot of time, which is why people don't like doing it because they'd rather the silver bullet or the get rich quick scheme that doesn't
Yeah.
really exist.
What?
But they're
What do you
always
mean it
hunting.
doesn't exist?
I'm sorry, there's
If
no
you
pyramid scheme here. Yeah. It doesn't exist. So yeah. But from a manager perspective, so when I joined this business, they weren't making really any cold calls. It was very much email based, and I kind of
Right.
understood it to a degree because we're selling to the world's largest companies. Our customers are Amazon, Vodafone. Um, it's pretty hard to get hold of people post. It's harder to get
Mm.
hold of people post pandemic, for sure. And there was never really a playbook or a lot of training around how to make a cold call, like break the cold call down, what does good look like, and that kind of stuff. So we also had a bit of an email challenge where emails were going into spam, even internal. So I said, look,
Oh,
we're gonna pause on the emailing for a little while. We're gonna lock ourselves away, and we're gonna learn how to make cold calls. We wrote a cold calling boot camp. We ran through it, took our time with it, and then we implemented daily role play. And we put in 2 hour long call feedback sessions on the calendar every single week. So role play happens every single day, still does today. And I'm talking AEs as well, by the way. So and for the first like 6 months, I would join those, be involved in them,
mm.
not to micromanage and make sure they're happening, but just to like provide feedback and share insights of what I'm hearing, or potentially support with tweaking areas.
Yeah. Is that one on one or is that in a group setting? Like, how do you?
So when the team was like 2 or 3, we just did it in a group on a Zoom call.
Okay.
Now there's like 5 or 6, and what we were doing is we just do breakouts on Zoom,
Oh,
and we'll chuck
break
like
rooms.
a
Yeah, yeah.
yeah breakout rooms. Yeah, yeah. So just chuck bit of fun. We do it randomly every day, a different group, which is good for like BDRs integrating with the AEs and building
Yeah.
relationships, which is pretty cool. So we still do that every single day. So if you're a manager thinking about, okay, performance isn't where you want it to be, it needs to go up. You want to take the next step into, really being obsessed with training, get role play in the calendar every single day. But first, get obsessed with building the playbook, especially around prospecting. Go really deep, ask for advice, ask for help. Don't feel like you can't ask for help just because you're the VP of sales. Yeah, we're all
Yeah.
here to learn. Every day is a school day. And then train them on the book. Then be
Mm.
accountable for turning up to role play every single day, 5 days a week, usually before your power hours. So if you're dialing from 10 to 11, do 9:30 like an
Mm.
athlete would before the game. They would practice, and then they'd go and hit the court, like you said, basketball. They hit the first tee box, or they hit the Formula One grid, whatever it is, right?
Mm.
And then put in those safe space kind of calling sessions where you can sit on a team on a 5 to 6 p.m. call, and listen back to each other's calls live. We take it in turns, go around the room. You're accountable to bring at least one cold call,
Mm.
good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring it to the call. I mean, when I joined in December, we had none of that stuff, and I was just cold calling myself, just using experience, and I was sending them the calls that were horrible. And I
Mm.
was like, it happens to us all. And then I was sharing the calls that booked.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's 2 sides of this thing. You can't just assume that it's always going to be good. We know there's going to be a lot of rejection in what we do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
creating that safe space and feeling comfortable as
Yeah.
a sales leader to do it yourself.
Yeah, I like that, and I think that's from a leadership perspective so important is to show that you're in the trenches with them, and because from a emotional standpoint, like people don't like the egos. If people got egos, like and they come to call and it gets ripped apart. Obviously, there's better ways of giving feedback, but that can knock people's confidence for six. Um, so showing that you've messed up or said the wrong thing, or someone's give you an objection and it didn't go the way you wanted it to go, like they can see it is a safe environment for actually no, this is not just to this is to make you better. This is not to scrutinize and kind of go through like what you did wrong and why you did it and stuff like that. It's more about the learning. And again, that comes back to, I guess, the interview when someone's going through is really understand that hunger, like you said, is are they going to take feedback on? Are they going to just like crawl up and just not be quite mature about taking feedback on and understand the underlying principles as to why feedback's given. So just on that then, thinking about that, like what should people like say a rep, right? Or an AE coming into the business when they're interviewing, like what should they be looking for from a business? like from a training perspective, because they can sell the company, the vision, the product. We're amazing. We do all this stuff, which is great. But
Yeah.
should they be really be focused on training the interview? Like, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I've just written that down because I've just got a little bit of additional to add to the management piece. So something that you can use as a manager, but also as a rep is it's not my model. I can't steal it. I came across it years and years and years ago, and it's called the 3 up, 3 down model. So
Okay.
basically, we do call reviews all of the time. We do deal reviews all of the time, at least once a week. They're always separated, um, and the 3 up, 3 down model is cool for the rep because they get to tag. So we use Gong as our conversation intelligence tool or a deal intelligence
Mm.
tool. But even if you just got like a normal call recording tool, you can still do this. But I get them to tag 3 moments in the call that went really well, that they're like really proud about, and 3 areas for improvement. There's always something that we can do. And a
Mm.
call, if it's like a full pitch that went on for like 3 to 8 minutes or something like that, there's always going to be 3 things that you could have done better. And it's that realization moments. They'll go into the call, they listen to it the first run through, then they go through it again, they pause it and they tag, at James, I think my pace was good, but tonality just let me down here.
Right.
So this
Yeah.
is one
Yeah.
thing to think about, right? So they kind of like, like when you go to see the doctor, they ask you a million questions, right? If you could have asked those questions to yourself and then said, actually, I don't think it's that, I disqualify that, but I think it's this, that appointment would probably be a lot faster, right? And you probably get to
Mm.
what you need, the action you need to take. So I get them to do the 3 up, 3 down model. I do it with them as well. But because we've bedded this stuff in, like these guys fly now, they're like super impressed with their performance on the phone. I've not seen a team be able to have such a high conversion rate when calling. People probably see me post about it all the time on LinkedIn. It just blows my mind. But that's only because they have come to every session with an open mind, prepared to learn, open to taking feedback, and then implementing it. That these guys absolutely
Mm.
kill it on the phones. Some people don't even believe the conversions, like, but legit, like the screenshots from HubSpot definitely is happening.
Well, just on that,
But that's
what are
because
the conversions? What are
so
they?
they on a cold call they see about 60 to 70% booking rate. So when they deliver a pitch, 7 out of 10 times. Sometimes we see it a little bit higher. I think the highest we've seen it like 91%. Um,
Nice.
but like that's not, if that was every day, that'd be awesome. But yeah, like 60,
Yeah. Yeah.
70% is where we typically float around, which is pretty nice given the buyer that we sell to is,
Sure.
we're selling it to an immature, like they're not used to buying software. They don't usually have budget control. It's
Mm.
not a mission critical tool like Salesforce is. And it's still a very new category. So these guys are killing it, and that's just purely based on their mentality and how they come into training sessions.
Yeah.
Um, and they're willing to learn. So they got the 3 up, 3 down model. It really drives the right
I like that.
behaviors. It's pretty cool. And then like running those team listening sessions doesn't have to be twice a week. We just do it twice a week at the beginning, but could be once a week. Then with your AEs, separately to that, so the AEs do the cold calling and the role play as well. And then every Tuesday and Wednesday at 3 till 4 p.m. Those are 2 hour-long sessions where me and the AEs do role play on something that we're trying to implement and improve upon. So if it's
Mm.
discovery and maybe it's challenging status quo or delivering, our narrative, or if it's, finding deep pain, not just, surface level pain, we'll just do that for an hour solid for those 2 days for 4 weeks. And then we'll be like, cool, do we feel comfortable? Is the data telling us we've moved the needle? Then it might be, business case. So how can we write a better business case? Who's got a deal? Let's see what we can do there. So this stuff takes a lot of time, and it's expensive meeting, but it's worth every penny.
Yeah, absolutely. It's more of a longer view of it, right? It's not just do training today and tomorrow you're going to get 100% plus results, right? It takes time to
Yeah.
implement for sure. Test it, try it. Feedback data. Um, a testament to you, like after 6-7 months, or um the team's performing, like they're great results. I think anyone listening to this now will be like, yeah, I'd want to be in that situation of getting 70-80% of a conversion rate, which is awesome. And just to
It's all
sort
those
of
guys. It's
reiterate.
very, very little on me. It's all of them. Like they come with an
Oh,
open
bless you.
mind.
Yeah, but like I think it's a combination, right? A high performance sales team is driven by the manager, and that's not just going, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. It's more a combination of really getting to know them, understanding their personality traits, and supporting and training as to what they need to do the job. Like
Totally.
they in the interview, they would have told you that they want to go earn X and they want to do this and they want to improve on X, Y, and Z. So yeah, giving them the platform to go do that, like that's great. Which is
Do you want me to
awesome
ask?
to hear. Hmm?
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, you wanted me to answer the other question. Apologies, I just realised I completely
That's all right. Yeah, no worries,
missed
mate.
it.
No worries.
So the
Yeah, but just
BDR,
from from an interview
looking.
perspective, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So one of the characteristics that probably every sales leader looks for is curiosity.
Mm,
In a seller, super important, right? And in the interview process, in the first stage of the interview process is where we really drill into it, but we keep it alive throughout the process. But when you're going into an interview, like when you're going into a new role, you're going to invest all of your time. Like, let's be honest, we spend all of our time at work, right? As
yeah.
healthy or unhealthy it is. I love what I do, and I spend all my time doing it. But I spend more time with my team than I do with my partner. But you have to be sure that the team you're going to bat for, she probably prefers that anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna
Um,
say.
yeah, it's less chaos. But like you're going to go to bat for these people, right? Make sure they're going to go to bat for you. And it blows my mind how many reps come into an interview, even experienced reps, and I'm like, hey, why are we having this conversation? Like, why are we on the call? And they're like, culture, or comp plans changed, or whatever it might be, whatever the reason, valid or invalid. They bring it up, and I write it down, and I'm thinking by the end of this call, they're going to ask me any questions about how they're not going to walk into that trap, and they never do. So they're
Ah,
like, oh yeah, I get no training. I don't get one question. When I say, hey, have you got any questions for me? We've got 10 minutes. I'm going to give you the floor. You go for it. They never ask a question that aligns back to their reason for leaving,
mm,
which then kind of makes you feel like, how curious really are you? Is the reason you're leaving genuine in the first place?
mm.
But if you're curious, you're going to ask those questions because they're important to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I go into discovery call with a customer, I'm curious to understand their business, their pain. Why the hell should they buy from me in the first place, and why should they buy right now? So I
Mhm.
invest my time and resources in the right account. Should I invest it with them now or in 6 months' time? So when you're a BDR going into an interview, especially if you're more so if you're a junior rep, but regardless, you should have a couple of questions prepared and be like, hey, how often do you train people? What does onboarding look like? How are you going to I want to go to this role, and I'm okay for it to take 9, 12, 18 months. I know I've got to learn and develop, but like, how are you going to get me there? Do you have any experience doing that? Have you ever promoted anybody? Like, if that's important to you, you should
Mm,
be asking those questions. Do I get a team budget? If not, will you invest your time, extra time
mm.
into me? Or like, what advice do you give to people if we haven't got a train? Do you see what I mean? Like, so what are those
Yeah.
questions that you're going to ask when you go in there? They just don't do it, and then they end up walking into a company that neglects them, because most do. And then they learn nothing. And then we spoke about it earlier. Scoreboard manager just says, "Hey, Aaron, you need to make more phone calls, send more email blasts, and do more LinkedIn automation." You get less performance,
Hmm.
right? And then you get fired and you go to the next role. So I think if you're a
Yeah.
BDR listening to this, or anyone that's going for a role, yes, you want to understand the comp plan and the territory and the exit plan, the
Yeah.
VC strategies, all that kind of stuff. But what's the coaching and the training schedule look like? Talk me through an experience. Ask an open-ended question.
Yeah. And even on that, like I think such a great point, right? Because you if someone's going into it, it's like, okay, well, if that like if a company right now has already got a team, like, okay, well, what have people in my position came into the team? What have they done? What's their progression look like? How have they, from where they started to where they are now? How has that trajectory looked like? And get a real good picture, because sometimes in interviews things can just be said just to, if they really like a candidate, sometimes they can go in with rose tinted glasses and just kind of like sell the dream. And again,
Yeah,
that has a opposing fact of, I've heard it so many times where they get in, they're just like, this is not what I've been sold. Like this is totally opposite. So yeah, I think definitely if you're going out there and interviewing for companies is really, it's important to ask those questions, because again, you don't want to be in the same situation you're in now, in 3 6 months time, if you've got that opportunity, you're given that opportunity to be curious in the interview, take it for sure.
And be bold and confident. If you feel like your
Yeah.
weakness is, let's say you're really strong at email campaigns, but just really struggling with the phone. Like, be honest. Like,
Mm,
I'd actually rather take you to the next stage if you told me, hey James, like I'll kill it on emails, or like my discovery calls, you can probably give me some advice, but like I really struggle with demos. That's where I fall down, and it's a weakness of mine. But I'm doing X, Y, Z about it. Curious, what can you do to help me become better at demos? Because I'm passionate
mm,
about moving the needle there. I'll be like, okay, this is a dude I can work with. Yeah, this is a
yeah,
guy that's open to asking for feedback, not afraid to show weaknesses, right? And is okay to talk about it on an interview. Like, what can I do with that
mm,
person in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days?
yeah. I
Versus the
love
one
that.
that's like, I'm elite dude, I can do everything. Just send me the paperwork, I'll sign it, give me some data, and I'll fly.
Yeah, it's like just a bit of a personal story about me. Just on that, so one of the main things that when I got into recruitment into sales was, sales can be taught, and trained, right? But attitude and how you go about things, like that's in your DNA. And I don't think I would have got the job at my first recruitment job if I didn't have the work ethic and attitude to go out and learn and go in and be creative, stuff like that, because I didn't have the sales experience. Like I was just like, I will outperform everybody. I will overwork just to get ahead of people because that's who I am. And then I ended up staying there 6 years and was one of their top billers for for 3 years. So sales can be taught, but again, it comes from what you just said, is that curiosity, but that hunger to be open and say, "Do you know, I'm absolutely crap at this. Like, help me. Like, what, like, how do you get me from here to then?" I'm just like, "Boom, this is easy. Like, what was I even thinking about back then?" So
Yeah, and if it's a
love it.
first time manager, they might not know, right?
Mm,
But the manager then should be honest, like, hey, dude, like, I don't know, but the reason I took this job is I want to develop people, and I'm pretty passionate about building a high performing team. And I don't know if you fancy taking a chance with me. Let's figure this thing out together. Because
yeah, I love
it's
it.
every manager isn't going to be like elite from day one. I've got so much to learn. Like, I've had a pretty good outcome a few times, but like I've got so much to learn, right? And there could be a situation my team comes to me like, hey, like we've got this painful part of our process that we just can't get through, and I'm like, dude, I've never seen that before. I don't know what
Yeah.
to say, but we're gonna have to figure it out. Why don't we? Should we build? Let's build a team and let's
That's it. Problem
go and
solving,
do this
right?
thing.
Solutions.
Hmm.
Good. Listen, loads to unpack there and loads of advice and information people can take away action. Again, on the point you said about the book, if James said something in this podcast and in this chat that you can take away, implement it, try it, test it, sure. But just a few final questions before we wrap up the show, James. Like, you've been in sales for quite some time. Like, what would you say is the biggest highlight of your career so far?
Um, like performance as an individual rep is great. There's nothing more satisfying, which is why I think it's true that when you become a manager, it's not about the title. Last business saw significant revenue growth. This one more passionate about the outcome these guys are seeing. Like this role is true testament that investing time in your people, that they can move the needle. To see them all go through target, lowest was 120%, highest was 240% in the first quarter working together when they struggled to get close to target the quarter before. It's got nothing to do with me. It's all about them. Their want and hunger and drive to get better, and continuously improve is super satisfying for me. Because, like I said, the only reason you really get into management is because you want to inspire and lead and develop and coach people to become better, replace you. Yeah, that's the true highlight of the career. I think is watching people grow. It doesn't happen overnight, as we know,
Mm,
but seeing them, even like recently, yesterday in the office, when I'm like, one of the reps comes to me and is like, "Hey, I got this problem with my deal. Late stage. What do you think we should do?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you think we should do?" And they
yeah.
suggest exactly what I would do. It's like it's really nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's for me. I'd say that's probably the real high.
Yeah, and self satisfaction from what you're doing and seeing other people do well is huge. But again, and not to go into it now, that is quite complex in itself. there's so many different factors that go into that. So yeah, accolade to you, mate. Well done. That's awesome. Can't wait to see what you guys do for the end of the year, and then see what the vision is for next year and where you're going to go. So um, just to sort of wrap up now, then, if you just want to plug in the business, what you guys do, if people want to reach out to you about the training that you provide or your products and services that you give out to the market, feel free just to give a elevator pitch and how people should contact you, or if you're hiring, if there's an SDR, BDR, listen to this and you're still recruiting, feel free to plug it in.
Yeah, so actively hiring for the team. We've got an enterprise BDR vacancy open. Hopefully you can tell we take development pretty serious. So
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
that's what you're looking for, I promise it's true. So feel free to come along for the ride. We have a lot of fun. And then yeah, like I've started helping people on the side. It's never going to be a full-time job for me, but
Hmm.
rather than doing the DIY or the house chores, I thought, why don't I help people before and after work? So I spend sometimes 3 hours a night on coaching calls, hour-long sessions before work this morning, with people, BDRs, all the way through to CEOs in Canada, US, throughout Europe, just to give back. Like I said, I've been in so
Hmm.
many roles where not been neglected, but there's not been a playbook and not training and coaching around it. And I think what I can do is give back to the community and meet a lot of people and have some good fun. So yeah,
Yeah,
like
I love
I've
that.
got lots of stuff on my website about training, about coaching. I started documenting, different parts of the playbook, and I'll continue to do so.
Hmm.
So yeah, reach out if you've got any challenges. Happy to share some insights. I'm pretty active on social. Making my way there. That's another thing that I'm learning. But yeah, reach out. It'd be great to connect.
Awesome. Amazing, James. Thanks very much today for your time. Hope everyone listening enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the next one. What an episode there with James. Absolutely loved that. Loads of actionable advice you could take away and really implement into your own business. Look at your own training and what are you doing, or potentially what are you not doing to make sure your team is performing at a high level. So he gave loads of examples of from a management position, like what could you be doing? How has he done it that works, that gets a higher performance? Also, if you're a rep, if you're in sales right now and there's areas that you're sitting there thinking, do you know what? I need a bit more training on I don't know, cold calling or emailing or whatever it may be. How should you approach that with the business? How do you progress your own career so that you become a top performing sales rep in industry? He also talked about not only being in the business, but if you're going out there and you're interviewing with companies, how should you approach that interview to really understand, is this going to be the right business for you? Are they going to give you the tools, the training, the processes, the support that you need to hit your targets, overachieve, and become a top biller? So really, really, really enjoyed that conversation with James. So we'll leave it there and I'll see you all on